What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my free hit draft for Game Week 29. So I'm going to walk you through how the team is looking from a defensive and attacking point of view, and also go through some alternative options as well. So let's get straight into it. So let's start with the defensive players. The first thing that people are going to point out is that I don't have any Nottingham Forest players in the main 11. And it's not that I think they're bad. I actually think they're pretty great this week against Ipswich away. They're a top 5 defence this season. Just kept a clean sheet against Man City. Weren't all that troubled in that game either. You could absolutely go for them. I've just picked different players. But there's a reason that Sells is my first choice backup goalkeeper and Aina is my first choice backup defender. It's a really close call, and if you wanted to put them in your 11, you absolutely should. Even a double up this week could be viable. In goal instead, I've gone for Jordan Pickford. I think Everton are very strong at home. It's West Ham, and that's pretty much the only reason I've gone for him over Sells. If it was West Ham away for Everton and Sells had Ipswich at home, I'd straight away swap them. So that's all really there is in it. So if you wanted to go for Sells instead, absolutely good pick. Back three, Gabriel against Chelsea at home, Vardio against Brighton at home, and Aitnuri versus Southampton away. Now, on free hit, people tend to want to bring in players that are low owned by non-free hitters, and I definitely think that is worth thinking about. Gabriel is not that kind of player. He's very highly owned by non-free hitters, so if you wanted to back against him for that reason, you could. I just think that Arsenal are so strong defensively. Yes, Chelsea have got Palmer and co. It will be slightly difficult, but I still wouldn't back against Arsenal for a clean sheet. And obviously he's got that attacking threat on top as well. So I think Gabriel is still one of the best defenders this week. But if you wanted to go for low-owned players, he's not the one. And maybe you could look elsewhere instead. Vardio, I'm not all that convinced that Man City will get a clean sheet against Brighton. I think Brighton are playing very well at the moment, especially from an attacking point of view. And you look at that game against Forest, Ederson makes a really good save to deny a goal. And then for the actual goal, it's just poor overall. And obviously Man City haven't been as good defensively this season. They just always feel like they've got a mistake in them. But the game is at home. And when you're looking at defenders with genuine goal threat this week, Vardio is one of the best. So that's why I've included him. And also he's quite low owned by non-free hitters. And some people will definitely bring him in this week. But it won't be as many people as you would think. And then Aitnuri, that's really a Southampton pick. I mean, if we're discussing who's stronger defensively from Wolves or Nottingham Forest, it's definitely Forest by quite a long way. But it's just the Southampton fixture. And also Aitnuri has been pretty attacking. I know he's not had the returns recently. But you look at his expected goal involvement, 0.17 against Everton, 0.17 against Fulham, 0.12 against Bournemouth, 0.1 against Liverpool. Not that bad considering the difficulty of that fixture. So I really like Aitnuri this week. But I'm not like super locked on him. If I was free hitting, I'm not sure he would be a no-brainer. I actually think if you want to put a Forest defender in there instead, that absolutely works. Also worth pointing out, the Forest defenders are very highly owned by non-free hitters. So maybe they are also worth backing against. So Gabriel, Vardio, Aitnuri looks pretty good. If you want to put Aina in there instead, I like it. And I'll talk about alternative options later on. So in midfield, some of you will be shocked to learn that I've picked Bruno Fernandes against Leicester away. I just think that's the kind of fixture that you want to target on a free hit. And there's not really any other Man United attackers worth considering. Like Xerxes, Højlund don't inspire that much confidence. I like Garnacho, but I couldn't guarantee that he would start. At least with Bruno, even if he's playing deeper, the minutes are there, the penalties are there. He's taking some set pieces at the moment as well. And he's quite low owned by non-free hitters. And also, there's not a huge amount of standout, obvious picks in midfield this week. Not as many as you would think. So even if you go for Bruno, I don't think you're going to get massively punished, even if he does end up blanking. So I quite like him on free hit. Next, I've gone for Mbeumo. He's just a solid pick because he's similar to Bruno in that the minutes are good, he's on penalties, always starts. But it is Bournemouth away. It's not that easy of a fixture. I just don't think there's a huge amount of other amazing alternatives like Odegaard, Foden, Son. You could consider them all, and I'll talk about them later. But with Mbeumo, you kind of know what you're getting, but he is very highly owned by non-free hitters. So in midfield, he's the kind of player that I would maybe think about backing against and just hoping for the best. And Bournemouth defence is pretty decent as well. So I think he's a good pick, but I think you can look elsewhere if you want to. And then I've gone for a double up on the Bournemouth attack with Kluivert and Semenyo. Now, at the time of recording, I haven't seen the lineup for the Spurs game, but presumably those two will start. I don't think I would go near Utara at the moment, even if he does start against Spurs. Kluivert's on penalties. Semenyo's got pretty much guaranteed minutes. And Brentford at home is a good fixture. I think Brentford have done well this season, especially in attack, but that defence is there for the taking. And I think Bournemouth can get at least 2 goals in this game, potentially even more. I don't think it's not going to be like a 4-5-0, and Brentford can definitely score plenty of goals themselves. But I think at least 2 goals in this match. I think doubling up on the attack is well worth considering. I think they are probably the best 2 picks, and they take up midfield spots. I think there's other good forwards that you could pick rather than Evan Nilsson. So Fernandes and Burmo, Clivert, Semenyo, decent enough midfield, but there are alternative options, and again, I'll talk about them a bit later. So I've gone for 3-4-3 in my draft. I think 2 of the forwards I've picked will be in pretty much every single draft that you see, and that is Erling Haaland against Brighton at home and Chris Wood against Ipswich away. If you watched that Forest versus City game yesterday as a non-free hitter and came away from it thinking, do I really need to transfer Haaland in? Fair enough. But if you're on free hit, I think he's a no-brainer. Palmer's got Arsenal away, tricky fixture. Salah doesn't have a fixture. There's money to be spent. Whatever you think about Haaland being value for money, it does not matter in 29. You've got the money to spend. He has to be in your team. He's still an elite goal scorer that's going to play, good fixture, on penalties, etc. Got to be in the free hit. There's no debate about it, in my mind at least. And then Chris Wood has just been excellent this season. Hasn't scored for 3 games. You could say he's out of form, but Ipswich away is a decent fixture. You know he's going to play. He's on penalties. I think he's got to be in. The third forward that I've gone with is Beto, which I think when you look at it feels quite boring. But West Ham at home, is a good fixture. At the moment, his minutes are great. He's basically starting and playing 90 minutes every game because Everton just do not have a huge amount of alternatives. For that reason, with no Calvert-Lewin, no Njai, presumably he'll be on penalties as well. And although he hasn't scored in the last 2 games against Wolves away and Brentford away, in each of those games, he's put up 0.62 XG versus Brentford and 0.66 against Wolves. He is still getting lots of chances, and that has basically been the case ever since he got back into the team. And under Moyes, they're playing well. So I think we have a tendency sometimes to have this psychological thing that because he's 5.1 million and because you're on free hit and because for this draft I got 1.5 in the bank, you've got to spend more. But actually, I just think he's a solid pick this week. Now, some of you would have heard me say for Game Week 28 that I'd probably take a punt on Strand Larsen ahead of Beto. I think that's still the case as a non-free hitter because of the better fixture in Game Week 30. But free hit, you're only worried about 29. And although Strand Larsen has got Southampton away, he's probably on penalties, but he won't necessarily play the full 90. And I quite like the home fixture for Beto. So if you wanted to go for Strand Larsen instead, just because it's Southampton, would not argue with you one bit. But I think Beto is more solid this week than maybe people will give him credit for. So just to run through some of the alternative options that I've got in each position. For goalkeepers, it's Raya versus Chelsea at home, Jose Sarr versus Southampton away, and Onana versus Leicester away. I think this week there's a lot of good defensive picks with decent fixtures, but I'm not sure there's that many that I would want to double up on. And also, you're not in a position where you necessarily have to double up because it's very easy to pick defenders that aren't playing against your attackers on free hit 29. So, for example, if I'm going to go for an Arsenal defensive player, I want Gabriel instead of Raya. For Wolves, I want Ait-Nouri instead of Jose Sarr. And with Onana, I just don't think you need to pick a Man United defensive player this week. So I'd rather have Jordan Pickford or Sells in goal. So I think they are players you can consider, but I wouldn't be picking any of them, I don't think, this week. Defensively, if you didn't want Pickford and you still wanted to back the Everton defence, it's probably Tarkowski, decent goal threat. I think a lot of non-free hitters have Mikalenko, but that's really a value thing. Again, on free hit, you don't have to worry about that. If you really wanted to double up on Arsenal defence and didn't want to go with Raya, you could go for Saliba, but that feels like a very boring pick. His goal threat just has not been anywhere near as good as Gabriel this season. And then Aina, who was on the bench against Ipswich away. You could consider Man United defenders as well against Leicester away because it's a really good fixture like Matsraoui, Dalot. I'm just not sure many people want to pick Man United defensive players, and I think that's absolutely fair enough. And then with midfielders, there are lots of options, but there's not many standouts, and I quite like that because you've really got to think about the ones you want to go for on 29. So Odegaard versus Chelsea at home on penalties has not got many attacking returns this season. That is a leap of faith, I would say. You could consider Trossard as an alternative as well, playing in that front three. The reason that I've gone for Odegaard is just penalties. That he hasn't done that well this year for FPL returns, so I'm not quite sure about that one. Son versus Fulham away, that just feels like one of those picks that should be in there because you've got the money to spend on him. But again, he has not been great this season. Like if we look at the returns for these two players, right? So Odegaard has, I think it's like 2 goals or something like that. It's 2 goals, 3 assists. Might get some against Man United today. We'll have to wait and see. And then for Son, I suspect he's done a little bit better than I expect, but not massively. Yeah, 6 goals, 10 assists. Like 6 goals from Son. It just doesn't feel great at all. So I don't know, like, if you want to go for them as punts because they're so low owned, I get it. But I think Bruno is better than both of them. And Mbeumo's been such a solid pick this season. Palmer, I'm pretty sure I would ignore on free hit. Very highly owned by non-free hitters. Difficult fixture. The kind of player that you can go against. Foden versus Brighton at home. Started yesterday for Man City, but was subbed during the game. I just think you've got to ignore Man City attackers that aren't Haaland. We saw what happened with Marmoush. Everyone bought him in. He started like 5-6 games in a row. All of a sudden benched. Foden could be benched against Brighton. You just don't know. If I was going to pick an attacker right now from their team, not Haaland, it probably would be him, but it's a risk. And if he doesn't start, he probably will come off the bench. So you've got that chance of a 1-point cameo. And then you've got Bowen versus Everton away. I think generally he's a pretty good pick for FPL. But an away game against Everton, I think they're a tough defensive team to break down. I just probably wouldn't go there. And then forwards, if Evan Nielsen starts against Spurs, you could definitely pick him. But I think Wood and Haaland are no-brainers. So it's like Evan Nielsen versus a Beto. Beto's on penalties, probably better minutes right now as well. And then Strand Larsen I already spoke about against Southampton away. So plenty of players you can pick from. Like I said, it's your free hit team. If you want to go for different players, absolutely should. There's lots of players you can choose from this week. That is just my thoughts. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you again soon for another video.